Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, Varun Mansali, welcome you in this session where we would be discussing the impact of abrogation of Article 370 and 35A in Jammu and Kashmir state. This is being broadcasted on our VR1 YouTube channel. This discussion has been organized by International Institute of J&K Studies and Analysis, that is ITSA, of which I am the co-convener. ITSA has been a pilot project started in Jammu with the aim to ensure that the correct version of voices of civil society are heard at national and international level. It is felt that since 1947 or even earlier, the happenings in Jammu and Kashmir state have been and are reported in a distorted manner, depending on the selfish motive of the individual or the organization or a political party concerned. So we are making an earnest effort to get the academic intelligence of Jammu and Kashmir state on one single platform and apprise the world about the true situation on ground and the real feelings of the masses in Jammu and Kashmir state. The general citizens and their voices are ignored by decision-making powers. Today, I have a galaxy of intellectuals from Jammu who would be analyzing the situation in Jammu Kashmir after de-operationalizing of Article 370 and 35A. We would discuss this evening that the de-operationalizing of Article 370 is a boom or a pain for the citizens of Jammu Kashmir who have been suffering from the dirge of your due to selfish motives of handful few and are condemned due to the misery. I now hand you over to Brigadier Dr. Vijay Sagar Dhiman, convener of International Institute of Jammu and Kashmir Studies and Analysis, ITSA, who will introduce you to the chief guests, the panel, and our distinguished guests. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure and a matter of great honor for me to be in the presence of this distinguished intellectual from Jammu and host of other special guests from India and abroad. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the idea of ITSA, that is International Institute of Jammu and Kashmir Studies and Analysis, was conceived by me after my retirement from the army. Well, post-retirement, while I was the Vice Chancellor of a university, I was also in touch with your think tanks in Delhi and abroad. And one such organization even offered me a fellowship. And I was too happy to accept that, but I explained to the management that my research on Jammu and Kashmir and the allied matters must take place within the precincts of Jammu and Kashmir state. So that I'm in close touch with the events as they happen and not as reported by some motivated, selfish segments, including that of media. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my efforts for 2 years did not bear fruits as it involved finances. And the managements were not ready for this kind of a venture to pay me some money to go and start my work in Jammu. And finally, one day on the advice of one of my counselors, our revered Mr. Narendra Shishodia, who will be joining us very soon, and he's also an ex-Director General of IDSA, that is Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. He advised me that I should not waste my time in this venture and must start something of my own. Well, I set out to configure a small research entity in Jammu, wherein today we are only 5 of us working on ground, and we have a patronage of about 35 intellectuals like you all who are keeping their hands on my head. So, most of the people are present over here also in this August gathering, who provided me with a lot of prudent advice, and I extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you. However, my work did not end here, and I guess God also wanted to test my resolve. Well, all preparations done by me had to be halted due to Corona outbreak. And now that the Corona restrictions have been partially eased out, so we decided at least we should go ahead with the webinars at least. We had plans to be offline, and same has been reflected in the approach paper which I have forwarded to all of you. And this is how the ITSA is shaping up bit by bit, but surely there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will now like to introduce you to our chief guest, Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, Well, I'm so grateful to you, sir, that you accepted my invitation, and I'm so happy and elated that you are on the panel with me here, sir.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador doesn't need any introduction. He's an international thinker, a prudent analyst, and whole world knows about him. And we all are aware of his tremendous experience in the areas of diplomacy, and especially in case of South Asia, wherein that he was, I think, sir, you had 3 tenures in Pakistan, if I'm not wrong, sir, including the one of an High Commissioner. And today also, government, whenever they want prudent advice on this area, this region, and I'm sure, I know that General Ambassador Parthasarathy is always there. So thank you very much, sir, and warm welcome to the portals of ITSA.
Thank you.
And now I will also introduce you to a few of our guests from abroad. We have Dr. Amjad Ayub Mishra, who will be joining us, Mirza, who's a human rights activist from Mirpur and TOJK, and now in exile in UK. He will soon be joining us. I think he also has some problems of connectivity problems, so he'll be joining in. And Mr. Varinder Sharma, who's an MP in UK, is already with us. A warm welcome to you, sir. Then I'm also expecting Ms. Lakshmi Kaul. She is an advisor of Bob Blackman, again an MP in UK, who's pro-India. And she also told me, just give me a phone, and she'll be liking very soon. Then we have Lalit Sharma, president of International Dogra Society. Manu Khajuria, she's also running a similar Dogra organization in UK. Then we have Simone from Switzerland, Vania from Portugal, Boyd from Canada, Tabindu from New York, Virti Kha from New Zealand, and of course, the final foreign guest of mine, my life, my friend, philosopher, guide, and everything for me is my daughter Kanika, who is the third.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. If anybody else wants to have any questions with the esteemed panel, they can have. I think Kanika ji is having one question.
So, I mean, thank you so much. I had a great time listening to everyone, and this is often what I have heard. I am again not an expert like most of you, but just so that we don't end up in an echo chamber where we all pat each other on the back and we're happy with each other's ideas. Living abroad, this is something that one hears quite often. Varun has mentioned many a time during the course of this discussion that let's not listen to biased media and so on, but unfortunately that is the media that one listens to. It's the BBC and the Al Jazeera and everything. And there has been widespread criticism on the act of the abrogation of Article 370, of how it was done, and what does that say about our democratic process. And mostly, I have friends in Kashmir, having stayed there for 3 years myself, schooled there, wherein among the people, and I think this is what also Mr. Bhan pointed out, that we didn't really integrate the people in the decision of the abrogation. And there isn't very much said to it. I agree with it, and I agree with most of the points that have been put across by people on the panel today. But this sudden, swift, historic decision where you sort of house arrest your political leaders, democratically elected political leaders in the valley, where you cut off internet for months on an end. What does that say about the India that we're living in, the India that we're progressing with? And given this, and given that this is not going to go away from the mind of the Kashmiri youth, how do you think we can progress from there from a social point of view? I think that will be a question if somebody could discuss on that, and I'll propagate it in my circle of friends. So I'll have something to say to them, because at the point I don't.
I would say one thing. We are a nation. India is the largest and most diverse democracy in the world. We have 17 national languages or 19 national languages. It varies from time to time. We have people of every religion living here. The Semitic religion, we've had Jews here, we had Muslims here, we have Christians here. We have our own Indic religions, starting with Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and then Sikhism. And You will never find a society as diverse as this anywhere in the world, not even in the United States, which says a lot about itself. But the fact is that this is a unique experiment in democracy. We have not gone the Chinese way, we have not gone the Soviet way. Anyone in Kashmir who is arrested faces a due process of law and is generally released. Most of those actions taken are not legal, not legal in the sense they are not meant for legal thing, but they are preventive. That is provided for in our constitution, which I think I regard it as the most democratic constitution in the world. Now, you will therefore, in this diversity, have different points of view coming forward. Okay? If it is confined to debate, yes. But unfortunately, here politics is also given a religious and ethnic content. That's the reality. We are a diverse society. And therefore, if you are going to maintain peace, you don't use the armed forces. If you ask the army to come in, they say, hey, we are here to defend the borders. So, and it is the state police. It's seldom that you use New Delhi's forces. So, the Americans went through a civil war to maintain their unity. And now when the Americans preach to me, I say, brother, the way some of your federal generals burned down places in the south is not funny. So, it is a process of nation building. But the most important point is religious, ethnic, cultural diversity. I mean, I find girls in South India more happy now with the salwar kameez than with the sari, and it's the other way around in North India and Punjab. So, you're absorbing, you're giving, you're taking, and I think you will have to make this point. Never before in human history, anywhere, including the contemporary, have people with such diversity lived together in one national home. Some things go wrong. Sometimes you have to use force. Sometimes there's a foreign element involved. You have to, if guys get AK-47s from across the border, you can't send guys with pea shooters to meet them. So it is a complex country. There is an external element. But remember, every election which has been held in Kashmir, I know, at least since the 90s, has been totally free. Nobody has messed around with it. And it's really, I think, between the people of Jammu and Kashmir to sit down together and give us solutions which they all collectively accept. We'll take it.
Yeah, a few points, Kanika.
Yeah.
Number one, you mentioned about BBC. I'd like to just tell you, go back into history. It's thanks to the Britishers who divided India into two, created Pakistan, has also supported Major Brown, you must have heard his name, in Gilgit-Baltistan, to backstab India. The plan was signed by a British Commander-in-Chief of Pakistan Army for Operational Gulmarg, which was launched by deceit, backstabbed through tribals led by Pakistan Army in civil dress. So that was swift, sudden movement. As you use this term, how could we do it so suddenly and swiftly? 72 years we've been dealing with this particular problem, and there was no resolution on the horizon. And for last 30 years, do you know, more than 40,000 people, youth from Kashmir, were taken across the line of control, given training, armed, brought back as mujahids, and so on and so forth. That was also sudden. So if people go astray and do all these kind of things, I can vouch for it. I have served in Kashmir for 2.5 years in the middle of North Kashmir insurgency. I was looking after the entire North Kashmir. I can vouch for it that Indian Army, some element by default or by design, would have done some stupid action against humans, or so to say, the human right violation. But by and large, 99.8 or 9% our troopers, our central armed police bases, have never been showed their ruthlessness to the common masses and common people. We've always helped them. Look at what we have done in Sadbhavna for them. And they in fact, people in Kashmir I'm talking Kashmiri Muslim women and men, swear by Indian Army. I'm making a very tall statement because Mr. Bhan is also sitting here. Then they would believe the police forces. They were against the CRPF. They were a little more leaning towards towards the BSF, and much more toward the army, the RR, Rashtriya Rifles. They wanted RR to come and replace CRPF and send them out of Valley because of the wrath that the CRPF would do on the common masses, because they were police forces and they were all from all different areas brought in without, detailed kind of knowledge. So what you just said, you can tell your friends that there's a background to it. It's not sudden and swift. We have shown resilience in the country for good 72 years. I would like to quote one small quote from Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, quote unquote, on Article 370. When he was asked, कि इसका क्या करना है, इसको, let's break it. He says, इसको रहने दो, ये खुद ब खुद घिसते घिसते घिस जाएगी. Unfortunately, never ghizzed. And it only took yet another Prime Minister, our Honorable Prime Minister today, to actually throw it out of the window.
May I remind the participants that the Article 370, many clauses were abandoned during Sadiq's regime. For example, Governor Sadr-e-Riyasat was renamed as Governor. The Chief Prime Minister was renamed as Chief Minister. And the process was very silently going on at that time with the consent of the Kashmiri leaders. And Mir Qasim, and after the Sadiq's demise, when Mir Qasim took over, again, the process was on. But unfortunately, Indira Gandhi signed an accord with Sheikh Abdullah and the process was reversed. And I will tell you that a very prominent parliamentarian of that time, N.G. Gore, told me that in 1965 winter session of the parliament, Lal Bahadur Shastri had decided to abrogate Article 370. And it was not done because of the 65 war. So it all happened because of the certain follies somewhere here or the other. That is, if Sheikh Abdullah Accord was not there, 74 would have, as you rightly said, कि घिस के खत्म ही हो जाता उस समय. But anyway, history is history.
सर वहाँ से स्पेशल स्टेटस चाहिए और वहाँ से आज़ादी मांगते हैं. The demographic of Kashmiri Muslims is to a tune of 60 lakhs in the valley, between 55 to 60 lakhs, living on the heaven on earth. And there are no Pandit today, driven out. Kashmiri Sikhs are just not more than 30,000 in bits and pieces, minuscule, living there. They are total majority. And they are the best of the time, the best of money for last 30 years. It's an industry. Terrorism is an industry.
Sure.
I know each nook and corner of North Kashmir, starting from Lola to, you go to wherever, any area. There is no kacha house today in any village in Kashmir. They're all pakka. There are three cars, there are jeans, there are jackets, there are money, abundance. So, actually to my mind, now that I look back hindsight, I think the abrogation should have been done in 1990, when the whole thing started. You ask me, Azadi? 1990, we should have abrogated 370 and 35A, and this whole thing would have been resolved at least 20 years ago.
On Kanika's issue,
Right.
I have my comments. I've told that the Article 370 is not restricted to the one clause of restricting the powers of the Parliament to enact clause for J&K. It is a comprehensive provision, and as rightly said by Mehta and Professor Suresh, the question is, it has an inherent constitutional mechanism of extending all the provisions of the Constitution of India to Jammu and Kashmir. And it happened, as rightly said by Professor Suresh, it happened till the rule of Mir Qasim. When Sheikh Abdullah came, during his time also, there were 2 or 3 provisions were extended. But later on, they started blocking all these things and treating the Delhi central laws as something like of obnoxious to people of Kashmir. How can a central law, which is good for, as I said, good for 130 crore Indians, is bad for 1 crore people of Jammu and Kashmir? So because they wanted to misrepresent to the people and made create a mindset against Delhi. So 370 was used for that, and that's why it was bad. That's all.
Great, sir. Great. So there's one more question for Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, sir, from our participant Jay Keshav Mishra. And this question, I think, is very apt, and we should, this question needs to be asked: that can all nations across the globe, including India, who are in some kind of trade and economic exchange with Pakistan, boycott and isolate the terror funding nation? Why haven't we able to succeed on it, despite the fact that every other day Pakistan and its ISI are sending their terror troops into the country and violating ceasefire, abrogation of article, ceasefire. So abrogation of article is very good move, but Pakistan won't stop its terror funding.
Yeah, I think I'll answer you on that
Yeah,
one.
yes.
You see, let's face it. You live in a real world. Don't forget, these Americans were the people who first armed the Pakistanis. It was they, Americans, who built a military culture in Pakistan. So when the Americans preached to me, I said, preacher, heal thyself. That's first. Second, on a more realistic thing is, they enjoy all the democratic freedoms enjoyed by other Indians. And nobody is calling into question the provisions of our constitution. And the Americans should remember that they went through a civil war where millions died to maintain their unity. Now, if someone comes politically, yes, they are a part of the democratic process, they are a part of our parliament, they can influence. But if you take to arms, that's will be dealt with. Coming to Pakistan, don't forget, it is the most populated Islamic country in the world. It has used religion effectively, but that is now wearing thin. Problems like this are not settled in one generation or two. It takes much longer. What has happened today is that gradually Islamic countries are realizing that Pakistan is offering them nothing. All that they want is their support on India. And if you take the remarkable change which is taking place just now, two of the most powerful countries financially, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, back India. Never forget that. And therefore, this don't communalize these things, because the fact is that we are the only country which has equally good relations with them and with Israel. And we try to help in resolving their problems. So we have our problems, but this is going to take time. The problem of Alsace-Lorraine in Europe lasted for centuries between France and Germany. It was finally resolved in the World War. So these are things which are going to take time. I think the important point is India has evolved as a pluralistic democracy. All religions are accepted. There are different views of how that acceptance should be given. But we are total religious freedoms everybody has. These are not freedoms other countries enjoy. So I think in putting it to the foreigner, that is it. It's up to Pakistan. I think during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, they made an offer, but it was made after cross-border terrorism ended. Don't forget 2003, 2004, 2005. They even cooled off on the Hurriyat. So when they create a right atmosphere, we can move ahead. But the fact is, name me one other country in the world with such a large majority of people whose religion is not Semitic. The Indian religions came up here, as I said, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. These are Indian religions. They will have to live with that reality. But anybody can come here and practice anything. Today, the person who's delivering the antiviral drugs to us is a Parsi. And he came in here, he was welcomed because he was persecuted in Persia. And look at what the Parsis have contributed. So I think India's pride is that. And in fact, that is the pride of our ancient culture. That you have been persecuted, you come in here, you stay. You're as an equal. So I think we'll have to put it in this way. No other country in the world is as pluralistic as we are. Nobody else has minorities whose problems have been dealt with. Kashmir is special, Kashmiris are special, so this is going to take time, and you have Pakistan, which is creating problem. Also, you must remember many of these jihadi groups came up at a time when Wahhabi Islam was widely practiced. Most of these people are largely from fringes of Islam which don't prevail everywhere in the world. So they will have to learn, and that happened largely because of developments in our neighborhood. So we are going to deal with it, how long it takes, and we will not give an inch of territory to anybody. On that, the general is here, so he'll tell you, he knows better than I do. We will not. But we're willing to talk to everyone. Even Mr. Modi, look out how he reached out to Nawaz Sharif. What did we get in return? Nawaz is ousted, and in comes Imran Khan, led by the army. And those of you who, please read some of the things I've written recently in the Tribune about what's happening inside Pakistan. They're back to square one. Thank you.
So Jaykeshav, you can unmute yourself and clear the doubts you have.
That was a question straight from a very ordinary Indian, and I am thankful for your answer. Maybe even others can answer this question. Thank you. Yes, my only point was that it's taking time. The isolation boycott of Pakistan is taking time, as well as the life of our Jawans. That is happening very frequently.
So, sir, there is one question from my side. I've been into journalism for like the last 15 years, and to the channels like NDTV on one side and on the other side, Republic. I've been to both, so I've seen both the things. So one thing I've analyzed is that all these people who are Kashmiri Muslims, like Lieutenant General P.S. Mehta has said, they are strategically being kept as illiterate, and not just in Kashmir, but everywhere. So when will the steps to make them literate will come up? And I think that will be the biggest solution if it will come up.
That depends on the reception of the people itself. Education is a state subject, and the Kashmiri government can't be asking for unlimited amounts of money. Their share is more than any other state government receives, if you go by per capita terms. And therefore, I think one of the things is, I'm sorry to say it, but governance in the state has been very poor. Come around to Tamil Nadu, you will see about an 85-90% literacy. You will see women working everywhere. You do it in all the southern states of Maharashtra, or up here in Haryana and Punjab. Look at the standards. So it's up to the Kashmiri to make the best of it. No point of his complaining that I haven't got ABCD. ABCD more, you got not ABCD, you got up to GHIJ. So that message has to go through the contribution has to come from within. But if you are wasting your time wondering about what the Pakistanis are going to do for you or what someone else is going to do, and also I could tell you one thing: you go to the United States. Both my daughters have studied there, and I've served in the United States for almost 3.5 years. I mean, Kashmiris do very well abroad. They're not going. They're not asking for guns or taking to guns. They have done very well abroad. So I think the Indian democracy gives them the best opportunity they can get anywhere in the world. Ask them to tell me one other country in Asia where they'll get better rights or better living. So I think it's also a process of educating the Kashmiris. You know, one of the reasons if you read my proposals, when I said let's open the LOC to allow people from the other side to come, then our Kashmiri brothers will learn what is the reality. The real problem is when you close people to people contacts, they don't. If I can assure you, it is totally army Punjabi domination of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. That's it. Gilgit Baltistan is being dragged in against their will, and we will take it seriously. So Kashmir is going to take its own time. As I said, the problems in Europe took centuries to settle. We were trying to move when Musharraf gave up terrorism. So these things will take time, and I would like to see Jammu and Kashmir, everybody living in harmony. You should not have these differences of what your religion is, of what your practices are. Diversity is India, and India is diversity.
So may I add, with your permission, one or two sentences?
Yeah.
You know, sir, in Valley, because I come from there, I belong to Kashmir. You know, they were asking for Azadi, which I said that it amounts to their aspirations.
Yeah.
Today, sir, the fact is that in Jammu and Kashmir, 93 or 94% of all the government jobs and posts are held by Kashmiri Muslims. They have no Sikh, you can see one or two in some government department. Pandits gone, very few left. There are, I think, not more than 1,100, if the figure is correct, in the valley area, who were left behind, who were poor, who could not move on because of various compulsions. So their aspirations have actually been met. They've already got their Azadi. They've got money, they've got decor, they've got everything done. Look at the thousands and thousands of crores money which has been pumped in, not only by the government, but also by the army and paramilitary forces. They have achieved their Azadi, sir. I think they should recognize, the people of Jammu, the Valley especially, must understand that now they need to stop. They need to enjoy their life. Otherwise, what's there to enjoy after this? So thousands of people, Kashmiri boys, have died.
I think everybody should know. Nobody can disunite India. India is going to remain what it was when it became a republic. There is no question of any change. And this is a message, I think, which has gone loud and clear. The army has done their job. I think the political leadership has done its job abroad. So no saudebazi on territory, land, period.
I think most of you have missed about the Kashmiris. I mean, the Kashmiri Muslims, naturally they are in majority, has been to dominate the Jammu province, not because of the area, but because of its resources. If you read carefully the newspapers of Kashmir for last 3-4 years, people across the civil society have been pleading that the hydroelectric power stations should be handed over to the state. Why do they want these hydroelectric power stations? Because the major revenue is going to come from Jammu. Forget the religion. So they want to use that money for the valley. So they want to actually colonize the Jammu. That is the reason that they are against the abrogation of 370. The reason is basically their domination of Jammu is going to be over, hopefully.
I would advise them that you do so well abroad, you don't need any privileges here. I said they do so well abroad.
Yeah.
That they should surely compete on an equal basis within India.
Fair to the youth of Kashmir.
Yes.
I have been in the public service for 5 years. I found that despite the long spell of conflict, the youth of Kashmir was much better. and they were very well articulating the issues of national importance. And I feel when we look at Kashmir, or when we start dealing with Kashmir, we should not look at them with prejudices.
Right.
That will be a fatal process.
I want to say something.
I want to say something.
I want you to say something. I think it is time there was an intra-Kashmiri dialogue on this, because by serious people, because one, it is going to remain an integral part of India. Two, it's sort of will have to evolve with the times. I mean, look at Tamil Nadu. We had a separatist movement in the 60s. They have been ruling the state now for since then, but never is there a talk of secession or separatism. They are proud to be Indians. So it has to be taken in that way. You'll always have separatist sentiments in a pluralistic society, but you overcome it. And India is just too strong, I would say, spiritually and otherwise psychologically, that separatism will not be accepted in this country.
If I may just add quickly to that, I speak from a point where I have friends that I studied with when I was about 10, and I'm still friends with them, and they are some of the most wonderful and some of the most intelligent people I know, who are doing exceptionally well. I have friends who wear full hijab, but are some of the smartest girls I know, who help me with my code as well. So I don't think the intellect of the Kashmiri youth needs to be in question at all. I think they're very, very smart. They're very, very capable. And I think, but I do agree that there is a bit of miseducation, if I may so. And I do understand it, being from the generation, which is the 89, 90 born generation, where we've grown up with this, where they have grown up with bombs blasting out when they're in class. And this is not a normal situation which anyone grows up in. And given that, given how their parents reacted to it, given how their immediate family reacted to it, there is a religious component to it as well, where it is us versus them. I think this is the narrative that we need to correct. And this is the basic, and given the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits from the region, you have undeniably broken the fabric of society there. Our pluralistic talk doesn't really apply to that state, which is a Muslim majority state, or a Muslim majority region, not a state. So I think there has to be, as you said, there has to be a very serious talk about it, which needs to permeate into the youth, so that they're not, led far vis-a-vis, you can see their reactions in cricket matches and so on. But they're very smart. They know what's good for them. I think this is a general Indian trait. We look at our own personal interests before we look at the community interests. And this is given our circumstances of how we've been under British rule for so long and so on. And there's a scarcity of resources and a lot of people, so that's understandable. So, but I would reiterate, do not doubt the intellect of the Kashmiri youth for a minute. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're very smart people. And I would also agree that if there was a plebiscite and if the youth participated fully, we'd actually have a India majority there. But then I think this is a great thing. This center that's created should talk to the youth more than anything else. And if you are all writing articles, I would really hope that even things that are obvious, that you say that we know this, maybe our generation doesn't know this. For example, I still don't know why the Article 370 could have been used to produce this misconception that they could have gotten Azadi. Like, what was in the article? Like this is the thing in India with the youth today. We know so much because of social media, but we don't know the actual technical contents, and we don't need to know that. But we do need somebody to come out there and put it in simple layman terms, not in law or constitutional language, to say, this is what is written there, and hence this or that. This is the same problem with the CAA as well, and the same problem with Article 370. I still don't know what was in that article that led people in Kashmir to believe that they could have gotten an independent state out with that article. And because it's been removed, all hell's broken loose and there's a pandemonium, essentially. So I think
you're in America. You know, the Americans. I've got a daughter there.
Yeah.
The Americans believe in American exceptionalism, right? tell them, tell them, preacher, heal thyself, on that.
But anyway, please keep writing articles and please sharing them so that we can share it in our circles and just educate people and have healthy debates as we did today. So thank you.
Sir, I've circulated this in many groups of Facebook and many pages. So there, it is more than, I think, 50,000 people it has gone across, and they have been watching this video.
There are probably 43 countries that are watching this or will watch it.
Thank you.
So we will try to send out a very important message and thereafter also. And I thank you all. And I'm very, very happy today on this inaugural webinar of International Institute of J&K Studies and Analysis, which is a small little pilot project we're starting for 3 counts. I'm very happy. First of all, it has taken off very well. And secondly, you all are there. I'm so, I don't have the words to say that I'm so happy that you all intellectuals are with me and talking on the platform with me. Thank you so much. And second issue is, as if I have permission of Ambassador Parthasarathy to say, we do have a certain amount of biased opinion reporting, motivated reporting, but when we sit together in the context of the same place as the J&K state, we definitely come out with a different vision, which Sir has said, and it vindicates my stand with which I started this journey.